Are you a fan of horror movies?
Necronomicon Ex Mortis, the Book of the Dead.
What about cult classics?
Your move, creep.
If you are, you'll love Shocking Things. Please search for us on all the major podcasting platforms. To see our social media and a direct link to our podcast, please go to anchor.fm/shockingthings.
Tracy Smothers, Harley Race, Tim Storm, Bushwhacker Luke, Bobby Fulton. The Pro Wrestling Vault, Volume 1, Bill Dundee, Supermax Hernandez, C.W. Anderson, Ricky Morton, Sir Mo, and many others share their stories of determination, triumph, and sorrow. Get your book today at Russellville.com or at Amazon.com. Russellville, it's where wrestling lives.
Welcome, everybody, to the PWZ podcast. This is Rick Del Santo, and joining me today, I have a very special guest, someone I've been looking forward to talking to for quite some time now, Flynn Hendrix. How are you, sir?
Rick, I am good, man. And if you've been excited to talk to me, you've got some low standards, but I will take it, man. I'm excited to be here.
I'm a fan of wrestling down from your area. We'll just say that.
Oh, perfect.
So,
Perfect.
And I live. It's a shame that I live all the way up in Connecticut.
Ooh, man, you got to make a pilgrimage to get down here and enjoy that.
I was actually ran through there for a brief minute in February.
Okay.
For just a couple hours. That's it. I was on my way to North Carolina. It took me through there just for on the highway. That was it. Anyways, I want to get to talking about your wrestling career, something that I don't know a few things about you. So before we get into your actual career, tell me about what drew you to wrestling and how did you discover it as a kid? Man,
so I'll be honest, my story, you hear the typical stories where everybody sees it and they're hooked right away. I remember seeing it in third grade in 1998. I remember seeing a Stone Cold versus Undertaker match on TV, and I thought it was cool, but I never really stayed hooked to it. And then I remember, a year or so later seeing that This Is Your Life Rock thing. Went on vacation with my family in in the summer of 2000 and was at Bash at the Beach with the infamous Hogan and Jeff Jarrett situation. Didn't remember any of that. Just remember two guys fighting behind me in the stands. But, come January of 2002, Royal Rumble's coming around. Triple H is coming back. All my friends in middle school are just getting hooked on wrestling and they're going to watch the Royal Rumble. I didn't get to do it, but then you start hearing, oh man, The Rock's going to face Hulk Hogan. The Rock's going to face Hulk Hogan. This is once in a lifetime. Everybody wants to be in on it. And I don't want to be left out this time. So I buy in. I watch the pay-per-view with everybody. And I'm absolutely hooked. Then, 2 months later, here comes Judgment Day. Main event is Undertaker and Hulk Hogan. I'm absolutely hook, line, and sinker at that point. You sell me anything wrestling, I'm buying all in. Just early 2002 really sold me on everything wrestling at that point.
I understand. That's how I was in the mid to late 80s. As soon as I discovered it, it was my first live show that got me obsessed.
Oh yeah.
So you couldn't tell me anything. I watched anything that was considered wrestling on TV.
Absolutely. And it's addicting. And one of the things too is even if you don't like it, if you go to a live event, even all sports in general, that atmosphere is what draws you into it, man. Because whether you're a fan or not, that atmosphere is addictive.
It brings people together, large groups of people, and it's a lot of fun. Mm-hmm. There's always something that's intriguing about it.
Yeah, whether it's the crowd doing the wave or it's a certain performer, whatever it may be, something draws everybody in. Right.
So I found something interesting today. You were trained by somebody that I grew up watching on television out of world-class championship wrestling. You trained with Cowboy Tony Falk.
Yes, sir, I did. Cowboy Tony, Boy Tony, Two Falk for sure, man. You run down the list of names, he's had it. So yeah, he was my original trainer and my original intro to the business. But oddly enough, he wasn't even the first guy I was supposed to train with. He was the third guy.
Okay.
And it originally was supposed to be Coco Beware after I graduated college, but come to find out, 15 minutes from my house, there's a wrestling promotion that Tony runs. And a guy that I went to high school with who was a year younger than me had suggested that I get in touch with somebody named Chris Michaels, who I'm sure will come up later in the conversation. But Chris and Tony had a falling out at that time, so he wasn't going to be able to train out of Tony's location. So he said, hey, just contact Tony and tell him you were originally supposed to train with me. And, you know, like three weeks after I graduated high school, I got Coco's blessing because he knew Tony. And, you know, he just said, hey, go to Tony because he'll train you right.
That's awesome. That's really cool.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Were you aware of his wrestling at all at that time period?
At the beginning, I wasn't, but then, you know, going back and looking, and you see him in the Driver Tony segments with Jeff Jarrett when you go back and start doing all the deep dives, and he's telling stories about I'll say I've seen him at the gym because after 2014 or so, I would see him in the gym. But, you know, back in the day, he's telling stories about going to the gym with Scott Hall or working out with the Poffos and all this other stuff. But first match with The Rock, first match with Kurt Angle, he's done all this stuff. He's been everywhere, but he's just never had the contract. He ref Stone Cold's first match. Like, he's done just about everything in this business, but I wasn't aware of all that until I got to know him and started doing more of a deep dive into what wrestling was beyond WWE at that point. Right.
That's actually a good question. What was the first wrestling you discovered outside of say WWE?
Oh man. A lot of stuff, as you were mentioning earlier with the 80s is what I first discovered, you know, like Dusty Rhodes Tours of Japan or Harley Race, Jim Crockett Promotions, and AWA. Those last two right there are probably the ones that are nearest and dearest, or at least my favorite, because, you know, like I'll say right now, Shawn Michaels is hands down my favorite performer of all time. The guy that hooked me, reeled me in, and just made me believe everything he did. But after that, you know, you discover Tully Blanchard, you discover Nick Bockwinkel, and you just want to get a deep dive into everything. And that kind of led me to this whole wide world of seeing some of these stars before they came to WWF and WWE, and just having more of appreciation too, because like you saw more out of Hulk Hogan in the AWA with Nick Bockwinkel than you really ever did in a WWF match. And it's just different circumstances, but it's cool to see him in a different performance light too.
He wrestled a different style than he would, where in WWF it was more of a show. In AWA, it was, I wouldn't say it was less of an entertainment value, but it was, more of a wrestling type thing.
Yeah, more looked at as a legitimate great match.
Yeah, exactly. And that was very important to Vern, was making it like it was a legitimate sport. And
absolutely,
I loved that and respected that as growing up. So you got to work with a lot of notable names over the years as well.
Yes, sir.
Such as, something that I was interested in. You did a seminar with Pat Tanaka, Bad Company in Orient Express. Speaking of the AWA, what was it like working with him?
Man, it was crazy because, truth be told, he was like the second big name that I ever did any kind of learning seminars with. The first was Tracy Smothers, like 3 weeks into training. But, like doing an all-day seminar with Pat Tanaka was just absolutely mind-blowing, because he showed you like better and easier ways to throw arm drags and make them look prettier. And just the way he explained it, the way he showed it, he taught us so much stuff in like a 6-hour seminar. And then that same night he was going to be on the show, and the promoter and the booker were like, well, you trained with him today, and I was the only one of the trainees that was actually booked on that show at that point. And they said, I think it'd be good to have you in there with him. Let's get you and this guy named Lee Cross that I trained with originally with Tony. And they put us in there with Lee, with Pat Tanaka and another guy named Lee Condrey. And man, it was a night off. And that night too, actually not only ended up being, like my first big name that I actually wrestled with, but it was the first time as a heel in the almost 2 years that I've been working at that point that I got to cut a promo, figured out that I could talk. So, you got that. And then I remember too, like Pat was throwing chops, but he would tell me as I was throwing them, he's like, you can turn me around, but don't you throw chops at me. It's like, okay, I'm glad you told me, because I was going to throw some chops at you. But, it's like, it was so easy. And the chops, I mean, granted, there's a picture I'll share after the fact, but like you can see me with him in the back, and I've got the handprint across my chest, and ooh, man, but that was kind of like a door opening moment for me. And it put a lot of people that didn't have a lot of high hopes for me. It put me on their radar and made them look at me in a different light too.
Right. You also worked with, let's see, you did Ricky Morton.
Yes, sir.
Who's an absolute legend in the sport and still going at, what's he, almost 70, 65 years old? Something like that.
He's in his late 60s, if I'm not mistaken. And I think he's tagging with his son now, too.
Yeah, Kerry Morton, they show up on Current Product NWA, which I watch every week. I guess him and Robert are doing the finale tour, grand finale tour, but him and then the three of them are sometimes touring. So how was that with working with Ricky Morton?
Man, as you mentioned, a three-way thing actually worked him in a six-man tag position. And it was so simple, so easy. Didn't have to be nervous about anything because it was literally all on the fly, nothing laid out.
Yep.
And the finish was really out of nowhere too, and not something you would expect. But I mean, like, it was legitimately a night off, and you understand why so many people all these years later, like, it just puts it in perspective why he's still held in such a high regard, because he's light as a feather, and not to pull too far behind the curtain, but he's out there making jokes with you as you're going through everything. So you really can't be nervous. You're just trying to keep a straight face.
Right. I do want to know that you did work for some on NWA territories at the probably in the early to mid 2000s. And you were the final holder of the NWA Mid-America X Division title.
Yes, sir.
Why don't you tell me a little bit about that?
Man, I have to say that was probably that's a regret that it didn't go any longer, but just due to differences with the promoter, I won't get into details on that. But
that's okay.
Truth be told, I should have stayed, but I stayed loyal to my friends instead of the promotion. Some stuff was going on there, but man, that was one that meant a lot to me, because that belt, I won it, and then the next night I got my first opportunity at the NWA World's Junior Heavyweight Championship in 2012, and just that belt went everywhere with me, working at other NWA promotions, working against other at the time board recognized champions like the Southern Heavyweight Champion, and just that show even main evented over the World's Junior Heavyweight Championship on certain NWA main event shows as well. And then, to defend it in its last known match in a 60-minute Iron Man match in a building with no heat and no air conditioning. And oddly enough, we were the semi-main event under the NWA North American and the NWA Southern Heavyweight title in a champion versus champion match. Just to know that we did that, or that I was the one holding the belt at that time, like, that's still something that I hold in high regard, 11 years later, or 10 years later at this point.
That's really cool. And of course, you held the Tennessee Junior Heavyweight Championship as well.
Yes, sir. It's oddly enough, it's like I go from the X Division straight to the Tennessee Junior Heavyweight. It's like 1 month gap in there. I retire one, pick up another, and then I hold it until I think it was retired once and then brought back and then retired like 2 months later. But I held it until mid 2013-ish, somewhere around there, for NWA Top Rope. And then Top Rope closed its doors for a little while. But, again, in there doing that, I had five separate reigns with it. And then I ended up taking it into my second chance at the World Junior title, that time against Chase Owens. And we went for 45 minutes in that match. And, it's just, again, having that title and being able to actually take it to other states and defend it. It made me, you don't see a lot of traveling champions, at least anymore in this day, because it's not necessarily smiled upon or looked at favorably. But at that point, it was Bruce Tharp's NWA, but other companies were willing to have that title there and have it recognized as a legitimate championship. And, I would get to defend it on other shows. And that was a pretty cool thing, because the traveling champion thing was a thing I became a fan of, with Ric Flair doing it and Harley Race, Dusty Rhodes. You hear about these guys going and just working with complete strangers, making it mean something and making that guy mean something. And, it gave me a chance to work with people I never really would have got the chance to work with otherwise too.
Speaking of Ric Flair, I got to ask you, obviously he's made the news quite a bit in the last 2 days. What do you think about him coming out of retirement for one last match?
So here, I have two feelings on that. One, am I allowed to cuss on here?
Absolutely.
Okay. It scares the ever-loving shit out of me knowing his health conditions and his age.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, the greatest of all time, won A with Shawn Michaels, and he had a hell of a send-off, and you don't want to see that tarnished. But at the same time, too, I'm selfishly tagging him in post because it's literally happening in my backyard at the Nashville Fairgrounds. I hate to say, I know he's not going to have a match with me, but I'm going to try and hook my name on it as best I can and get some free publicity out of it. But, it's just more than anything, I don't want to see the guy get hurt, especially knowing all the health conditions and everything he's had over the last few years, too.
I think it's been confirmed later this afternoon that Ricky Steamboat's going to be part of that match as well.
And that's what I saw, too, which if it is, man, that's going to be one for the ages. But again, too, that guy's had health problems, so I just don't want to see anybody get hurt.
Absolutely. I mean, if you think about it, Steamboat did come back, 2007, 2008, something like that, and put on a pretty good match.
Yeah, and then he had, I think he had the incident where he had a brain aneurysm or something like that as well.
Yeah, that was after that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I hope nothing happens to either of them. They are two of my favorites of all time.
Absolutely.
Flair is absolutely the greatest of all time, no question. So
I'm
very interested. I am interested in that match, but I am in agreement with you. I don't want to see anybody die in the ring or anything crazy happen because Flair has a pacemaker in. It's been noted quite several times since this announcement.
But I mean, that's one thing that keeps sticking out to me too is in interviews, he constantly says he's in better shape than he was, X amount of years ago when he was actually performing, which again, like he always says, there's a difference between being in shape and being in ring shape. So, like a few years before his health incidents, he's sitting there, like deadlifting 405 pounds. That's a hell of an accomplishment right there. But man, I don't know what his ring stamina is like, or like you said, if the pacemaker is even going to allow him to do this stuff that he used to do. So it's a scary thing when you don't know.
Yeah. I guess one of the other things that was mentioned is it's a possible tag match that him and Steamboat, would each have a partner. So I guess we'll have to see as it gets closer to that event. It's going to be part of StarCast this year. So
and that's interesting. That's going to be a stacked weekend in Nashville too, because it's going on right after SummerSlam too.
Yeah, it's StarCast that whole weekend, which is just the big event that they do, whatever. Yeah. And there's tons of events that surround it as well. So I kind of got a little bit ahead of the game. Tell me about some of your earliest stuff in the ring. What about one of your first matches, I guess?
Well, first match. First few, actually. I'll go ahead and say the first 4 years, and depending on who you ask, some people will say I got better. Some people will say I never did. But, like those first few years were a really big learning curve because not only was I going through different name changes, then I eventually went by my given name with my middle name, Dyron, but a lot of it was just going through the motions because I was so nervous and wasn't confident in what I was doing. And, that's from like the end of 2007 until early 2011. So like the first 3.5 years. And, people are still wanting to work with me. They're still teaching me. It's just putting the pieces together until that aha moment finally happened. And, once it did, man, it was just, I remember it so vividly, but like, I just remember before that too, a lot of those matches, and unfortunately some of them are on YouTube if people want to look and laugh, but it's just like you get in there with some veterans, like a Jeff Daniels or somebody, and you're so nervous that they're calling a spot, but it just goes in one ear and out the other. And, you end up embarrassing yourself a little bit, but you take a lesson away from it. And it ultimately has led me to be more confident and also helping, like these younger kids now that I'm working with, that blows my mind. Cause 15 years now, I'm considered a veteran to them. That's crazy to think, but having all those experiences that I did, just being so stiff and robotic, or being in a match with somebody that was also in my training class when we should have been working with veterans as opposed to working with each other and learning that way instead of learning like trial by fire. it really put a lot of things in perspective and made it easier for me now to help communicate with some of these younger kids that may be going through the same things, because I outside of wrestling, I'm somewhat of a teacher to like people in the corporate world, and I enjoy that aspect of things. So if I can find a way to communicate it and make it work, I take my embarrassing experiences and make it a positive that can help these people so that hopefully they can avoid that and, come around to the aha moment a different way. But, I got to give credit to a guy named Mike Promo, who again is, to some people, he can do no wrong. To other people, they don't have the time of day for him. But man, to me, he gave me such a grasp on ring psychology, storytelling, and just making it work for the entire room around the ring and not just that front row, to where what you're doing is legitimate storytelling with your body and your physicality, as opposed to just going in and doing the moves. And I remember being in a match with him where everything just clicked, and we ended up changing the finish of the match on the fly because he told me in the back after the fact, he's like, I wasn't sure if you were going to turn around and, start tagging me back and give me it back, but I'll be damned, you did. And I made the right call changing it on the fly like that. So, congratulations. You've got your man card in the ring now, something like that. But, it's just like having moments like that make all that time, that 3.5 years and all those matches in between to that point, just, they make it worth it.
So you are a USWO heavyweight champion,
Yes.
And was that Tony Falk's promotion?
Yes, it
I remember
was.
correctly. Okay.
Yes, it was.
So.
And man, funny story about that too. Going back to training with Tony, and the first time I left his promotion, I remember him telling me that I would never be a champion for him. And then lo and behold, 8 years later, I was his final champion. So it's, it's just one of those like full circle moments where like I kind of forced his hand because they asked me to come back, and I was firing on all cylinders. I had a faction around me. I was getting the most heat, but then it's like the promotion shut down 2 shows after the fact. But I went out as the final champion, and that was just a big damn deal for me.
I remember reading about them when they very first started, and I guess they had trouble drawing people at that time period. And I'm talking like really early on.
Oh yeah. I think it was like the early 2000s. I think I forget the name of the place, like the Galaxy's Gym or something like that in Madison, but it was right down the street from my house again. And I had no idea that this whole new world of wrestling was right in my backyard. And here's LT that's my age, and he's already, he's performing that young at that point too. It's like, dude, how did you start doing this so young? But he's still doing it today.
I came across him today, actually, which I guess leads to my next question. Yep. I was watching NWA Southern All-Star Wrestling, and he was on there. So how was Tony Falk involved in that? And I see that you were actually involved in that.
Yep.
So.
The thing was, I actually ended up working with them in around the same time I was the NWA Mid-America X Division champion. TJ Weatherby, before he passed, man, he made a point to make a spot for me there, and I would be coming most nights straight from a 12-hour shift at work. I would get dressed there, show up, walk in the locker room, and then literally my music would hit and I'd be out in the ring. Then I'd shake hands after the fact. But that place would pack out Friday nights. I loved the setup that they had. The locker room could have been bigger, but that's neither here nor there. But, eventually it got to a point where they got involved with the NWA near the end of the Bruce Tharp era. And I was the Southern Heavyweight champion at that point, and I ended up losing that belt to Wolfie D, and then it officially became the NWA Southern Heavyweight title. They became NWA Saw, and I think Tony was like an on-screen commissioner or something along those lines. But shortly thereafter, I had a disagreement and essentially just wasn't going to be bullied by some of the powers that be about different bookings and things like that, because that second opportunity I had at the NWA World's title for NWA Top Rope was 30 minutes down the road in Lebanon, Tennessee. But over here at NWA Saw, you're trying to delegate me to losing in 2 minutes to a vertical suplex while I'm the Tennessee junior heavyweight champion, but that's not being recognized here. So it made no sense. So I eventually ended up leaving there before in early 2013, I believe is when it was.
Okay.
But then Tony also started running USWO out of that building. So on separate nights, they would have me there, and that's where it ended up leading to me having the USWO heavyweight title. But eventually, when TJ unfortunately passed in 2014, everything just eventually ended up shutting down in that building, which was an absolute shame.
I thought that was a great building, and the setup for their television looked very professional, and it sounded great and looked great, and looked like a lot of fun. I like going back on YouTube and watching those old episodes. It's a really cool show.
And what's so crazy is like they had it down to a science to make it like a TV studio for Jim Crockett Promotions, where it's a smaller crowd, but they're so into it, and the camera angles make it look like it's a bigger arena, and it just like the intensity and the crowd energy there was so insane that like that when I did get to work there, that was one of the favorite times of my career too. Like it was just you look forward to that every Friday. You know, there's going to be an awesome show there, and the crowd always brought it, and it made my job as a heel easy.
So eventually you, I guess we'll get into podcasting and other such things in a little bit, but you ended up retiring, and then you ended up, I guess this past January coming out of retirement. Did I get the time right?
Well, there was a couple other retirements in there actually. Okay. I guess I'm a lesser known version of Terry Funk when it comes to that, but I honestly, I'd originally considered retiring right around the time in 2014 that I got married, and my wife and I were going to, start trying to start a family. And Bert Prentice, God rest his soul, gave me a send off, and I actually got to work against one of my former tag team partners. And, family came out to it. They gave us, like, everybody in the crowd gave us a standing ovation. Bert gave us one, and I thought that was it. But then lo and behold, about 6 months down the road into 2015, Bert has my, former tag team partner, Zach Hartnell, ask, hey, do you want to come work a show for me up in Lebanon? We got a big armory show coming up, and I need a tag partner for Zach. And I hemmed and hawed around it a little bit, but I knew I was going to say yes. So I did, came back and worked for a little bit. And then, again, later that year, we went to some different places between Lebanon, Gladeville, working for Bert, went down to Chattanooga in Georgia, did some stuff there. And then I just eventually stopped taking bookings until this promotion called UPW in Bowling Green comes calling. And that's my friend Randall Shane, and hadn't heard from him in years. But, he says, hey, I'm starting a promotion, and you're one of the top 2 guys that I would like to have and, start building a promotion around because people haven't seen you in a while. So again, I try to fight the urge to say yes, but I know I'm going to do it. So I just go ahead and say it, get licensed again, let that run its course for about 2 years. And then Zach Hartnell comes up again. He was my last match in November of 2018 for a debuting promotion called Iron Pro. And lo and behold, we're semi-main on that show. And I had no intention of like not taking more bookings after that, but I just didn't. I didn't renew my Kentucky license to keep taking bookings the next year. And I just kind of stopped, as we found out we were pregnant with our second son at that point. So it just kind of, the universe worked in that way until, fast forward to December of 2021, Vic the Bruiser, legendary name around these parts, says he's going to be retiring this year. He's already, started his retirement tour and all that fun stuff. Says, I want you to come back, and I want you to be a part of some of these retirement shows. And, you can't say no to a guy like that, especially when he wants to work with you again. So you go through the process of getting licensed, you get your physical, and here we are again. So I guess I've retired like 3 times, but now I'm back and I'm having fun. So
that's awesome.
Yes, sir.
So you ended up, you mentioned his name just a second ago, feuding with Zach Hartnell.
Yes,
and then you ended up, which match just went, And a match that went all over the arena. Was that supposed to be last man standing? I didn't put it in my notes. I'm sorry.
It was actually, I guess you would consider it just no holds barred.
No holds barred. Yep.
Yeah, and depending on who you ask, it had like 3 different stipulation names or whatever. But it's funny because, going back to that USWO mentioning that faction right there, he was one of the guys that I had in that group with me. And funny enough, too, he's the guy that I wrestled on my wedding night because stupid me, the dedicated wrestler instead of the dedicated husband. The night I got married, we did our ceremony earlier that day. That night, I drive down to a show for Bert, and I faced Zach Hartnell. So he's tied in my life in so many different ways. But then eventually, we come back and we start a tag team, and then tag team splits up, and we've been feuding ever since. And the thing was this most recent match, and he was actually my first match back after 3 years off too. Was for the UCW Southern States title, which is sitting right here beside me. Now it's on camera. Yep. One of the longest active titles in the state of Kentucky. And, the stipulation was false count anywhere. I've beaten him with brass knuckles twice. He's been caught trying to use brass knuckles on me. So essentially he was just trying to find a way to guarantee his own victory, and it backfired on him. He ended up dumping me in the trash, but I walked away with the belt.
See that.
So karma gets him. I'm still champion. But yeah, like that's I think I've got a little bit of a break from that guy now, so I don't have to worry about getting dirty. I can stay sanitary for a little bit, but now I've got to defend this bad boy across all these different fair shows we got coming up.
Before we switch directions here, what do you have coming up wrestling wise?
Oh man, wrestling wise, I'm actually going to be traveling out to California here in the next, actually, as we're recording this now, next Wednesday, my wife and I fly out for LA and Anaheim. And then when I get back, I'm going to be making some appearances at the Nashville Comic-Con. And then I will start the defending tour on June 8th in Salina, Tennessee. And then pretty much throughout the month of June and early July, I've got 14 different fair dates between Tennessee and Southern Kentucky that I will be defending this, and then ultimately competing for the UCW heavyweight title. And I will also be making some more convention appearances in Lexington, Kentucky as well, with the title for Honors Against Hate. So cool. A little bit all over the place.
Yeah, it sounds like you're busy, and I know you're really busy with a lot of other stuff a lot of your other projects that you have going on.
Need sleep.
I understand.
Oh yeah, I wish I did need sleep. I wish I could get more of it, but you gotta do what you gotta do.
Yeah, I get it. So you also are a voice actor.
Yes, sir.
So tell me how you got into that and how you like that.
Absolutely. So it's really funny how the performance bug really never leaves you. You hear Stone Cold say, or as he said in multiple interviews, he transitioned from wrestling to civilian life. Well, it's hard to get that bug out of your system, especially when you get an adrenaline rush from people, booing you or cheering you or whatever the factors may be. But I just remember randomly being on Facebook, and I see this ad from a voiceover artist named Steve Bloom, who people may be familiar with, like as the voice of Wolverine from the X-Men or Spike Spiegel from Cowboy Bebop. And he was offering a 1-hour masterclass on how to get into voice acting and what he offers with his Bloomvox Studios. And, I knew like my neighbor up the street did voiceover for commercials, like regionally and different things like that. And that's how he paid the bills. And I thought that'd be pretty cool. I've performed before. I've done stage performance. I've done band and all that fun stuff. So I gave it a shot, and what he had to offer really enticed me. So I signed up, and then you get to start doing classes with these people that were the voices of your childhood, like Charlie Adler, Cow and Chicken, Tiny Toons, you name it, he did it. E. Bradley Baker, the guy that does the voice for all the clones in Star Wars Clone Wars, or in Phineas and Ferb, or all these creature voices in Hollywood.
I love that show.
Yeah, same here.
No, my kids loved it, and I just grew up watching it, so I always used to watch it. The Phineas and Ferb was one of the funniest.
Oh,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, you're good, man. I love hearing stuff like that because It just shows you how like these cartoons and these things have such an impact on all of our lives. But you don't get to know the person behind the voice, and like then you get to meet them, you get to learn from them, and you actually get to thank them for what they did. And like you get to take this knowledge that pre-COVID even may not have been accessible to you because you didn't live in like a Dallas or an LA or a New York, one of these major voiceover hubs. So like you get your intro to the business from these legends, and you get to thank them at the same time that they shaped your childhood and they made you want to pursue this. And then, you find out who the best coaches are. You find out how to get a demo made and all that. And you find out how to make a booth, which you can kind of see partially mine right there. That'll be upgraded soon, but you find out what equipment to make. Like it's a whole process, and it's fun to do. It's a labor of love, just like wrestling. And what really blew my mind was just how much wrestling actually prepared me to do things like this, because, it kind of opened your eyes up to the people that were trying to, work you or lead you in the wrong direction, or the people that were being genuine with you. It taught you how to project and, like put yourself out there, because it's easier to go too far and reel it back than it is to pull something out of somebody. So like wrestling, taught me how to go big and just improv these performances basically. And then even from that, I learned that, it's more than just making voices. It's actual acting. You just have a microphone in front of you. So I got heavy into improv, which I'm still doing. And again, oddly enough, there's another wrestler from your neck of the woods that's in my improv group now, and still trying to get booked up there to go work with him, but that ain't happened yet. But, it's like, it's just funny how this all kind of prepares you for these different worlds. And I mean, that's led me to have 3 different agents now. I've done commercial work. I guess people may know it like for Yelp. I've done it for Stanford University. I've done it for a manufacturing company in Oklahoma called J&I. And, I've even done stuff over in Germany for like their mobile TikTok ads and gaming ads for League of Legends, because I made it a point to learn dialects as well. And I've learned 13 different dialects, and they needed a Southern voice for their commercials, for like a Southern general. And that, learning a dialect got me booked. And just having all this under my belt before I came back into wrestling even has just completely changed what all I can do now as a wrestler. And it's still giving me that performance itch, but the only thing that's hard about it sometimes is I'm literally in an enclosed space, and I may have somebody on the other end of the screen like we are now, but sometimes I'm having to self-direct myself, and I'm having to just shut my brain off and just realize, okay, was that good enough? Is it good enough? Okay, just send it and forget it. That's the hard part. It's just not being your own worst critic, which, again, in wrestling, you go back and you watch a match, you see what you did good, what could be better. With voiceover, if you do that, man, you're going to drive yourself insane. That's all I can say about it. But it's been an awesome thing to help me, chase that itch, and it's led me to some great opportunities. But I'd be lying if I said I was anywhere near done with it, because there's still so much more that I want to do. And ultimately it's how I would love to make my living full time.
So it does keep you busy though.
Oh, absolutely. Like after this, I've got about 8 auditions that I'll have to knock out before the night's over. So
I heard you mention that in your most recent. Yeah, I listened to your most recent podcast. I heard you say that, you work and then you come home and you do what, 10, 15 auditions real quick and then knock them out. I mean, I find that when I heard those numbers, I found that insane.
Yeah.
That you have time to do all that.
Man, it's a labor of love, like I said. And there's some days, I have to get out of this mindset sometimes. There are some days that I am just completely just dead to the world because it's been a stressful day at work, or we've had like baseball games for my oldest, or whatever it may be, or I'm just not feeling it. So, some days I have to tell myself it's okay if you don't do these, because you're not going to bring your best to it. Then you're just wasting your time. You're wasting their time. And, you got to know when to put it on the back burner. But, it's just, if they keep coming in, that's my job to do them. As long as they fit for me, I'm going to make it happen one way or another.
Right. That's really cool.
Absolutely.
So you ended up starting podcasting as well, and you've been pretty busy with that. You have several podcasts, correct? You have, or at least two that I'm aware of.
Yep, just two right now. There's potentially a wrestling one coming down the road. I will say I've recorded a couple episodes for that. And I'm recording it with one of the guys that actually got me into wrestling. And if you listen to my podcast, I Know You Hear Me, it's my friend Chris Rucker that actually interviewed me on the first episode of the podcast about marriage. And I'm going to drop a couple episodes in the I Know You Hear Me feed just to kind of get a feeler and see how the numbers look for it. Because, everybody's got a wrestling podcast now, it seems like. But one of the things we want to look at is just like, what would happen if, X event didn't happen? Like the first thing we talk about when we recorded it, it was timely because, unfortunately Scott Hall had passed away. What would have happened if Scott Hall hadn't gone to WCW? And then, another one that we have coming is what if William Regal hadn't got suspended in 2008 when he became King of the Ring, and where would that run have gone? It's just like different things that would have changed the shape of wrestling, or maybe given somebody that title run that they never got, or just what it would have looked like for the landscape of the business as a whole.
Do you have a name for that podcast?
The name we're looking at is Wrestling with Hypotheticals.
Okay. It will be in the I Know You Hear Me feed, so
absolutely.
I can find it in there when it's released. And I just subscribed today, by the way.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
I was doing some research, I wanted to get a feel. And I really enjoyed the episode that I did listen to. I listened to the most recent. But on the podcast, you have all sorts of people on there.
Oh, yeah.
Such as podcasters, wrestlers, actors. So what drew you to making that way?
Man, I'll be honest. It's a multi-part answer to this because one, it was a big outlet for me to just open up about things that I've struggled with, especially things like continuing when you don't see the results right away or whatever it may be, and just how other people have overcome that, or how they've prioritized their mental health and avoided burnout. And for some of these people, like wrestlers specifically, I mentioned Chris Michaels earlier. Here's a guy that has worked for every major promotion known to man. He's trained a who's who of wrestlers and future Hall of Famers like Brock Lesnar, Randy Orton, John Cena, Batista, you name it. He trained them, but he never got the contract himself. And he's had X amount of injuries that would have retired other people. How does this guy keep himself motivated and keep himself going? Or, like up and coming actors that may have booked jobs, but nobody knows who they are because they didn't book like a giant role on a Pokemon show or something like that, but they're the voice of a Pokemon commercial. What's it like for them? Like how do they deal with the ebbs and flows of voiceover where you go on a hot booking streak and then you hit a low period? How do you stay motivated until that next audition or that next booking comes your way? Or, man, I've even talked to my friends that are teachers and just like teachers of the arts. Like, how did you do all this during COVID? How did you teach virtually during COVID and not lose your mind? Like, how did you do that when nobody knew what was going on and nobody really gave a shit about like performing arts during that time when they should have? Like how did you do all that? Like there's just been a plethora of different people, and I've been fortunate enough to know like a lot of these people through my different endeavors, and just the fact that they want to come on and chat and just take the time and not be difficult about it. Dude, that means the world to me. And by all means, I'm gonna give you a platform to say whatever you want, as long as it's not, like offensive or racial or anything like that. But like Dan Severn, for instance, I recorded an interview with him back in February when he was driving cross country. He just talked to me on the phone and we recorded it for the podcast, and that's going to drop in August. Like I've recorded so many episodes to get in the can now as this year's gotten busier for me. So, like I was telling you earlier, you're going to be a future guest, but I'm booked up till August, then haunt season starts and I go back into acting again and I have no life. And then I'm going to pick it right back up around the holidays and start interviewing again. But right now I've got enough interviews in the can to get me to the end of season 3 in February of next year. So it's just, it's a time intensive labor of love and having a lot of friends that want to chat.
That's incredible. That really is. That
Absolutely.
You have that much and you're booked up that long. It's just incredible.
I'll be honest, man. I did not think it was going to take off the way it had. And I mean, like, don't get me wrong, my numbers are by no means like an Adam Carolla's numbers or anything like that. But man, people are tuning in, people are listening, and they're sending me messages and like, hey, I love this week's episode, or like you just mentioned and you just subscribed. I appreciate that more than I could ever say.
Yeah.
So it's just knowing that people enjoy it makes it easier to continue doing it for sure.
I don't listen to many podcasts outside of like, say, wrestling podcasts or music podcast, so to hear something, it's a little bit different, but I really enjoyed it. I mean, I do listen to some movie podcasts every now and again,
right.
Shocking things that, I ran the ad for earlier. It's a fun thing to just do stuff out of the norm, listen to stuff out of the norm, it's cool.
Absolutely.
So you also, tell me about the second podcast you have, The Haunt.
Yep. That would be Tales from the Haunt. And oddly enough, like last season, fall of 2021, which was probably the busiest and most stressful time of my life to this point. Like I made a bunch of new friends there, and my now audio engineer, Jeff, goes by Just Jeff. He's my co-host for that show. He said, hey, have you ever considered doing a haunt-themed podcast where you talk to different actors about how they got involved, or talk to people that run these haunted attractions and what it takes to actually make it happen, or whatever it may be? And I was like, I hadn't, but that's a hell of an idea. And we hadn't really seen anybody else like that. And if you have done that podcast, I apologize that I wasn't aware of it sooner. But, it's just a unique concept. And it's got its own little niche audience, but it's still growing. And like I was mentioning, that Haunters Against Hate convention this summer in Lexington, that's going to be the first convention appearance for that show. And I mean, it's just been so unique because we've not only told our stories, but we've talked to people that were, like in the haunt for like 15, 20 years or so. And now they work on the corporate side of it for like larger known nationwide companies that run haunted attractions, and what it's like transitioning from one to the other, or hiring new actors, or even our first couple of guests ended up meeting each other at the haunt and getting married. So like just talking about what that's like, how you maintain having a 9-to-5 job and work haunt season, because you work 7 days a week at that point. And sometimes you're working both jobs 6 days a week, in what we call Hell Week leading up to Halloween. So how do you function during that? What do you do that maybe we could learn from? And then also too, if somebody wants to get involved at a haunted house, how do they do it? What would your advice be to them? Just, things that people don't really think about, but we get asked a lot while we're in character at the haunt, like, hey, how do I work here? Just giving that to them.
Wow. That's cool.
Absolutely.
It sounds like a lot of fun. It really does.
It's a unique experience for sure.
All right. So I want to ask you, do you have anything else you want to throw out there today? Anything you want to plug, promote, or?
Oh man, let's see here. As far as plugs and promotions go, let's just go down the list, man. I'm on all social media platforms, and my podcasts are on all podcasting platforms as well. Easiest way you can do that is just go to Linktree/the Flynn Hendrix. That's FLYNNHENDRIX. It's got links to both podcasts on all their platforms. It's got all my social media. It's even got links to my pro wrestling tee store and information on how you can order shirts directly. And then you can also keep up with my different upcoming appearances, whether it's going to be at different Comic Cons or the promotion, the fair shows that I mentioned earlier for the UCW promotion. I'll be defending the Southern States Championship, which is back on camera again, somehow, some way, and where I'll be competing for the UCW Ultimate Heavyweight Championship as well. But go check it out, man. I mean, like I said, from the beginning of June till the middle of July, I am going to be booked solid. Then I've got some things at the end of July that I can't really talk about right now, but they will come out in due time. But yeah, man, just go get connected on social media. And if you've got a convention in your area and you want me to come and do a live podcast, tag me, tag the powers that be, see if they can get me in the media room, and I'll make the trip out. So I'm here to perform. I'm here to work. And if you got a promotion that you want to see me perform at, or you just want me to come and you want to boo me, tag me in that promotion, get me in touch, and I will travel.
I want to thank you for joining in tonight.
Oh, dude, of course.
Flynn. I had a blast talking to you.
Same here.
It really was a great time. And I want to thank you. And I guess that's it. So we're going to get out of here. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. And don't forget to like, subscribe, share. Goodbye.